Welcome, everyone, to the third annual Partner Alliance for Safer Schools Summer Series. Today is the first of this year's webinars, Concept to Completion. My name is Jim Crumbly. I'm your moderator today. I've been involved with PASS since day one. I've had the privilege of seeing how the PASS guidelines have helped thousands of schools across the country and really even internationally now. As school administrators, consultants, and integrators, you all face extreme challenge in managing tight budgets, shifting regulations, daily educational operations. And no doubt you've learned that school safety, it doesn't happen by accident. And it shouldn't be driven by the latest sales pitch or technology trend either. Instead, it must be rooted in a strategic, visible framework that transforms your concept into a completed security plan that enhances the safety of students, staff, and teachers. Today, we're breaking down a practical roadmap to take you from initial safety concepts to final project completion. We'll show you how to use the past guidelines to objectively assess your risk, prioritize your limited resources, and build a unified, layered security strategy that protects your students without disrupting your learning environment. And to help us complete this goal, we've got a great panel of experts with over 75 years of experience in project and program management. And we're going to begin doing this right now. All right, I want to go ahead and let everyone introduce themselves. Les, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Jim. I'm Les Nichols. I work as an independent consultant for schools and other organizations. I've been involved in safety and security issues for several decades, perhaps 45 years. Originally was an architect designing schools. Then I was the national safety vice president for a national organization that had 40% of its sites in schools. And most recently, for the last decade, worked as a safety and security consultant for schools and other organizations. Been involved with PASS for the last 3 years. So really been an exciting experience. I got to work with a lot of professionals like the present company on this webinar, and it's been a real pleasure to be part of something that has changed so many schools and changed thinking about safety and security.
Excellent, excellent. Desiree, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, good afternoon. Good morning for some of you in the different time zones. I'm on the East Coast. My name is Desiree Bain. I've been in the electronic security industry for a little over 21 years, in the K through 12 environment for about 5 years. I've worked with physical technology on that side, from access control, burglar alarms, cameras, fire alarms, to larger projects involving systems integrations, enterprise solutions. A lot of my experience is in project and resource management, organizational change management, adaptive strategic execution. I work for one of the largest school districts in the nation, and some of the projects that I lead impact 220,000 people across 250 buildings. So I've been working with PASS since
Wow.
2023. I'm a member of the technical committee as well as the compliance committee evaluating PASS partnership applications.
Excellent, excellent. Scott Clark, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Jim said I'm Scott Clark. I'm Director of Health and Safety for Gary County Schools in Northeast Kansas. It's a much smaller district than Desiree's. You know, we have 16 school buildings, about 7,000 students. So I can speak to things from that perspective. I was first exposed to PASS at a conference in Las Vegas in 2018 when we were going to research and gather information for a big, for us, security management project that we were about to embark on. So since being exposed to PASS at that point, I have, completed that project, got involved on the technical committee. I serve on the compliance committee and in an end user advisory group, and just really happy to do anything I can to support PASS and everything that we're trying to do.
And that you have, Scott. Thanks a lot. All right, so let me start this presentation off by telling us everyone a little bit about PASS. If you're unfamiliar with it, we're an all-volunteer organization made up of school administrators, safety experts, law enforcement officials, manufacturers, integrators, a wide variety of experts in the field where we're all focused on making a difference instead of just making a sale. And so what we're doing is that our program provides school administrators and safety officials with the tools necessary to make informed safety decisions. We got tons of resources. Here's the greatest thing about it. They're all free. There's no charge for any of this. Again, we're a nonprofit organization. We're all volunteers, and we simply want to help. Within the resources and PASS, you can find safety and security guidelines. We got Rev 7, which was released about a year and a half ago. We're working on Rev 8 right now. We got tons of white papers. We've got a security assessment checklist. We have digital tools, assessment tools, and of course, we have webinars and live events. And you're participating in this webinar. We're very grateful for that. So why don't we get into the meat of what we're going to be talking about? All right. So Les, we're just going to start with you. Okay. Walk us through security projects, how they stall out on occasion, how they lose direction. And we're going to focus not just on physical security installations, but all the other things that we have to do, like training and program management and policy development and things like that. How do things stall out and lose direction?
Sure, Jim. Um, for me, a common denominator of school districts I've worked with is they do not appreciate at the front end of this the complexity involved in improving school security. Um, you touched on a few of those things just a minute ago. It's not only the physical changes, installations, it involves training, policy, a lot of buy-in, and really with having the goal of how do we increase our capacity to protect students? How do we maintain this? All of these should be considered on the front end before you do anything. That's a very complex proposition.
Yeah, so your plan, like it says on the slide, your plan grows out of your vision. Where do you want to go and how will you get there? Scott, what are some of the negative consequences that you've seen when a project stalls out?
I think the biggest thing, the biggest danger is, you've worked hard on this project, you've worked hard on putting it all together, like losing the momentum that you've put into gear. Losing that is the biggest danger of letting it stall, of not having the right plan to start off with. Losing momentum can lead to inconsistency at buildings, and really you're not accomplishing that vision that you set out to achieve in the first place.
Yeah, great. Desiree, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say that another common thing that stalls projects are IT issues and evaluations, cybersecurity. Which to Scott's point, impact to trust amongst the culture of your organization. And that's one of our greatest assets as security leaders is that trust in implementing new things to keep everyone safe.
Yeah, when you lose trust, you lose that momentum. All right. And or when you lose momentum, you lose trust. And when you lose trust, sometimes you lose budget, you lose dollars. So it's extremely important to lay out all the details in a project. In this 1 hour session, we're not going to be able to turn everyone into a project manager. We're not trying to do that. We're just going to give you some of the things that we've learned through the years of how to take your concept, your idea, your goal, and how to take that from just conceptualization into actual something that you can measure, that creates safety, that people can embrace, and that it can change and shift the culture in your organization. So we're going to do this by first starting with the 5 W's and a H. We've identified these. These are all the things that is the foundation of your project plan and your program that you're trying to develop. So if you can answer these questions, you're well on the way to a successful completion of project. These questions begin again, the five W's and H. It's why, what, who, where, when, and how. These are the things that we're going to try to do. It's really a process. And Scott, I want to ask you, what is important about a process template?
A process template can help that current project you're working on be successful. And it's really, having all these things worked out ahead of time, will make that project successful. But more importantly than that, it is repeatable, so that once you have done it once and you are familiar with it, whether the project is small or whether it becomes a bigger project, you can apply those same principles and do the same thing over and over and over again.
And one of the greatest things about AI that has come out, and there's a lot of negative, there's a lot of controversy, I get that. But one of the best things about AI is that you can ask them questions. You can learn lessons from other people's projects because it pulls it all into more of a digestible format to now you can read through it and figure out what it is that you want to do. So let's dig deeper now into the why. Why? Why? All right. Les, tell us about why.
So, sure, uh, Jim, you have to keep asking, why are we doing this? And the ultimate goal, in my experience, has been you are trying to increase your school's capacity to protect people. The methods that you use, the things you install, the things you build, training, all that leads to increased capacity. And how do we tie this back to our safety goals? How do we tie this to the district's own goals? And how do we tie this to compliance, not only with what the state may or may not require, but what are the leading practices? Where do we stand with other districts in our state? All of these issues are big goal issues that are within your capacity, your ability to address early on in this project.
All right, awesome, awesome. Scott, you had a great example of a why. You want to share that?
Yeah, I'll share that. I spoke earlier about a conference I attended back in 2018. We went to that conference to, collect information for that security management project that we were working on. The charge to me from my district administration and from our Board of Education at that time was, how do we make our schools safe and secure without making them feel like prisons, right? And it was very simple. It's like there's not some of the background that we're asking people to work on wasn't in that, but it's really succinct and a good question. I found when I was exposed to the past guidelines that it really answered that question for me. So that it started with a very simple why, collected information, and we've been able to apply, the past guidelines to develop our program over the last, 8 to 10 years.
It's interesting that all of these who, what, when, where, why, and how, all of that, they all fit together. So they're not silos, they fit together. So you go from a why to a how almost immediately. But the why are you doing things a certain way? It's because you had that mandate from your superintendent and from your leadership. Hey, secure us, but don't make us look like a prison. And that fits within your culture, which we'll talk about in a little bit. All of that fits together. And there are standards, there's regulations, the past guidelines. Within the past guidelines, we have tiers. Tier one is that base level of security that everyone should implement. It may not be very costly. And then you have tier four, it increases 2, 3, and 4 into complexity. But a tier one is not inherently automatically worse security than a tier four. It's all based upon your risk assessment that you did there. So you need to be asking yourself, why do we need to put this expensive technology into some area of our building, you need to be able to answer that question why. Because if you don't have a valid, good, risk-based reason for that, then maybe those limited resources need to go elsewhere in your security and your safety plan. So let's now jump into the second W, which is what? All right, what? So let's tell us a little bit about what.
Sure. So these goals that we establish, let's just say one thing you mentioned a minute ago, Jim, is we don't want our school to feel like a prison. Ultimately, that has to be brought down. That has to fit within the scope of what we're doing. It has to be brought into specific deliverables, and we have to have a way to measure whether we have achieved that or not. So the these goals have to be brought down to tangible and measurable whats. It's very important to keep that in mind that it ultimately has to, a project like this, it has to be quantified.
Okay. And it's interesting. You said something that to me really jumped out. You have to measure your success metrics.
Yes.
So one of the difficulties with security and safety is you can't measure things that did not happen. So you have to get a little creative on how you measure your success. It's not about just preventing an incident, because if an incident didn't happen, you can compare one year to another, but you really have to get kind of creative in how you're measuring the impact that your project is having on your overall safety plan.
Could I give you a very, very quick example
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
exactly what you're saying? Okay, so a couple of years back, I had a project where with a school, and like most schools, a big problem was people leaving the doors propped open. So we looked at all kinds of technological solutions, different kinds of electronic security, and different kinds of alarms, silent alarms, timed alarms, alarms that were audible that everybody would hear, alarms that you'd hear just, maybe a few feet away. And the issue comes down to what would be the measure that was a safe door. We agreed that it would be how long it would take before somebody resolved that. Did it take 1 minute? Did it take 2 minutes to resolve a propped open or an unlatched door? You can't guarantee no door will ever be unlatched, but you can provide a measure, a reasonable measure, that it would be addressed within X amount of minutes.
Excellent, excellent. Hey, Desiree, you had talked earlier. You have a good example of taking a why into a what.
Yes, we have a law that just passed here in Virginia called Alyssa's Law that uh, authorizes school boards to issue wearable silent duress systems to their staff. So that's a great example of why to do something. The what is what will happen when you push the button. Um, what will people do if there are false alarms? So those are some of the important pieces that kind of tie into the why of a project.
That's great. And one of the challenges I think administrators have nationally is that everyone's clamoring for them to do something. Do something, do something, do something. And quite often that something is technology. And that's not bad. That's not wrong. But if we don't really understand what we're trying to accomplish, we're just throwing money at the problem. And that's not going to increase safety for anyone, just throwing money at something. You really have to detail the what you're trying to accomplish, what your metrics are, what your deliverables are, what is your time frame, which we'll get into the win in a few minutes. All of these are important details you need to determine while you're starting the process of building out a plan. And that's what the five W's and H is. That's just starting that process. Now, let's get to what arguably is the most important W, and that's who. And this is Chuck Wilson's infamous bubble slide, but we've had variations of this slide for 5 or 6 years that we've shared around the country, and it tells and speaks to the complexity of how schools have to get to the who is involved, assembling the team, navigating the systems, plan, prepare, practice, all of that fits together. All right. So, um, uh, Les, can you walk us a little bit through the who here as I move to the next slide?
Could you move
Or
back?
you want me to go back?
Could
Sure.
you go back just for a sec? Thank you. So I can't emphasize how valuable this slide is. And it helps, if you look at this, it helps overcome a very natural tendency, and that is to narrow down the number of people that are involved in providing input, not necessarily the final decision makers, but the amount of input. Education as a profession is a very highly specialized and trained profession, and like all professionals, you tend to only want to keep things to your particular group. A problem like this that you're dealing with security and safety across an entire district requires an awful lot of input. There are an awful lot of rocks that have to be turned over that you may not have considered. There are a lot of aspects that you have to consider. There are a lot of challenges that need to be heard to ideas. And there's a lot of consensus building that needs to take place. That can't happen unless you build a very broad-based initial team to provide that. So this illustration to me is a very good example of what it is you want to do and how you've got to overcome that natural tendency not to do that.
Excellent, excellent. So, as we get deeper into the who, all right, you are assigning clarity, roles, responsibilities, stakeholder communication lines, and we love the RACI framework. All right, RACI R for responsible. Who will be doing this? Who is the work assigned to? Whose head will roll if it doesn't work out, which is probably your heads, but who's accountable, who needs to be consulted on a situation like Desiree mentioned IT, and who simply needs to be informed. And Desiree has developed a really good tool for this, and we're going to share it. We'll also share the bubble slide details in our white paper. But Desiree, talk a little bit about your who matrix.
Yeah, a RACI matrix is a simple, effective tool. And it's really important for project success because when everyone is responsible for something, no one is truly accountable. So this matrix makes sure that everyone involved has clear task ownership. People know who to go to, whether it's for information or to inform them, to ask for authorization. It prevents duplication of work, makes decision making faster, and for everyone involved, it ensures that there are clear expectations as to how they need to be involved in the project. If I can ask you to go back to the bubble slide just real quick,
Sure.
you can see at the top right, navigating systems complexity. Let's say you have a new duress system that you're going to be implementing within the district. Ours will integrate with the visitor management system, so we know everyone that's in the building. Well, who is that going to impact? Who will get notifications that maybe doesn't get them now? The mass communication, video surveillance. How are we going to bring cameras into this? How do we make sure that first responders have access to this information? So thank you. Thanks very much, Jim.
Okay,
Um,
sure. Awesome.
so
Very well.
the RACI matrix. Sorry, I wasn't done.
Oh,
The no, I'm done with this one. If you
oh,
go to
now
the
you're
RACI
done. Okay,
matrix,
now we'll go
yeah,
to this one. All right.
to the so this is just a really basic example of some people that you might involve in your project. And it's kind of hard to read, and I kind of have to turn my head like this to read it. But at the top, you can see who the individuals are. So you may have a CEO, a director, someone on the leadership team. Did you have your core team, the people that are actually executing the project, who are leading without authority and influencing others? And then you have other teams. You might have an internal purchasing team, a vendor, HR, your communications group within your school system. Um, and so I've found that it's successful to have a quick project kickoff meeting where you sit down and everyone agrees Yes, I would like to be informed about that. I'm in the Office of Communications. I need to be informed when, for example, um, um, the reprogrammed badges are not working. And that's because we have to get a communication out. So although they may be informed, they may have a resultant action item on their side that's not necessarily documented here. But it's when everyone is doing something, no one is doing something. So just getting it
That's
and
good.
having it all in one place, it's a great place to reference when everyone's going, who do we talk to about what? What's going on? Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
yeah, what I love about this framework is that it makes you think. So now you'll see on the left under the deliverable or task, and it's hard to read, I know, on a PowerPoint, but it is everything that has to happen for the project, then who needs to be informed, who's accountable for it, who's responsible. All of these are detailed. And Scott mentioned earlier the importance of a process is consistency. And that's what little tools like this can bring. It brings consistency. So when you find the right way to do something, if you do it the same way every time, it'll always be right. And I think that's really important for us to, as we're working through all of this.
Can
This,
I say one
yeah,
thing,
yeah,
Jim?
yeah, yeah. I wanted
I
to
want
see
to
if there's
encourage
anything else
everyone. I
you've
mean, I
got.
think this is an excellent tool, and it's, intend on, I intend on stealing it from Desiree, I encourage all of you to take a
Excellent.
closer look at it, download it, and consider, consider implementing it at your district.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a solid tool, really is. All right, thanks, man. Anybody else have anything they want to add to that? Because the who is very important.
I would like to add actually that, I think we've all been involved with projects where someone has said, well, geez, if you'd asked me about this when you were planning it, then I could have brought this up or that up. And so this is another way of building involvement and having your champions involved with the project from the beginning, and creating that sense of ownership and pride when a project is completed and you've met those measures of success.
Excellent. All right, now let's go to the next W, and that is where. Les, when is where more than a destination?
When is where? Yeah, indeed. So we think about where as physical, but in the case of a project like this, you have so much information that's going to be gathered, sifted, shared, reevaluated, prioritized. This has to happen somewhere. It's not going to necessarily happen in a physical place. It's going to happen more likely in a digital place. And so, where are we going to do those things? Where's that information going to reside? Where is it going to be evaluated and shared and refined? That's a very important consideration because you're not going to be able to get everyone to come to every meeting. And digital interaction is just a reality in today's business world.
Yeah, and it can be a good reality because
Yes,
you
it
can be
is because
much more efficient instead
yes,
of dropping across town. So you want to
absolutely.
make sure you have tools. What project management tools are you using on a regular basis, Scott?
You know, at my level, at like a smaller to medium sized district, we have a lot of project management tools available, but it really boils down in the end. Like we do a lot of work with spreadsheets and sharing spreadsheets and lots of virtual meetings. I feel that like having more meetings that are shorter and very productive are better than pulling everybody in person and trying to do all of them that way. Sometimes you got to work those in, but those that's
Right.
just an example of the kind of thing we do to keep projects moving and keep everyone accountable and yeah.
Oh, excellent. Desiree, you had when we've been talking earlier, you had a great example about a project you did and involving the 911 call center and some of the challenges you had with where.
Yes. So where is very important to establish at the beginning of the project and during the the conception phase where you're really starting to lay out your project charter, it can stall your projects. So, and I will get to that example, I promise, Jim, but looking at all these project management tools, if you are getting together with some 911 call center directors, for example, as well as a fire department, and CRG, which is the digital mapping group, and your vendor, and everyone says we want to use Trello to that's where we want to put all of our information and where we want all of our updates. That's probably not going to work out. I'm just going to tell everybody flat out, that's probably not going to work out. A spreadsheet, I'm with everyone else here. All the other experts, spreadsheets tend to be the best. Unfortunately, that usually results in a static report. But the where can absolutely stall a project if you can't figure out where and how you're going to communicate updates. But also, and switching back to the example, Jim, within the county that I work for, we have cities of. So we're in the county of Fairfax, Virginia, but there's also a city of Fairfax, and there's a town of Vienna, and there's also we have similar to you, Scott. We have a couple of schools that are on a military base, and so all of those different jurisdictions within our larger county have their own 911 call centers. So where the alerts are going was a very important thing to talk about from the beginning, to understand who's responding first, who, are they even, is Fairfax County able to respond within the city of Fairfax? And so having those conversations at the beginning was very important to make sure that if there is an emergency, everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing and where they're supposed to be going and what order to respond in.
That's great. That's great. It can really encompass a lot. And the more you ask yourself where, it can feed in a lot of different areas. And, I've been doing this, you can tell with the color of my beard, I've been doing this for a lot of years. And what I've seen a lot of times is that professional project management, and apologies for those who are professional project managers, sometimes the project management can become a project in itself. And so what I find is that anytime I don't have to use all those complex platforms and programs, but I'm still consistently documenting my projects and what I'm doing and timelines and milestones and all the other stuff that's so important in delivering a good project, it's easier for me to do it on a spreadsheet as well. It's just flat out easier. So, but there are some great tools out there, and some projects are so complex, are so broad, or you have a requirement for reporting, you have to do it. When you do, just uh, take the medicine and do it, regardless of what you feel like, which I've had to do. But really, the best thing about the where and getting us all together is that we're building consensus. And when you have consensus, you're less likely to compromise the what, because you're getting a buy-in from everybody. So the more you communicate, the more likely your project is going to be well received and it's going to be successful. Communication is, we even tell our guys and our team is that even if you don't have an update and you're telling a customer or a manager, hey, I don't have any update today, that's an update. Communication is critical. So now let's get into the win, right? So we can get into the win of this. Les, why don't you tell us a little bit, or I'm just going to speak to, I'll start with Les. Les, what
Sure.
drives the win?
Timing, I would say, is one of the most important factors in a successful school security project. And we look at these things: defining the scope and objectives, design, budget, installing, training, going live, follow-up. All of these have a certain time that they have to be done. There are many times it's opportunity or schedule driven. It has to coordinate with the school year. So there's a certain timing to design a project, come up with a solution, have it assessed. The assessment may not be able to take place at just any time. There's a certain timing for bidding a project or letting it out. There's a timing for execution, installation, for training staff, and for getting approval and even converting uh, things that you need to change into policy and getting those policies approved by your board. All of those are opportunity driven and time driven. So that's how I look at when as an
That's
important
excellent.
factor.
Excellent. Desiree, can you explain the difference between scope and design? Because some people get confused with that.
Yeah, absolutely. To simplify it, the scope of a project is think of a jigsaw puzzle. The scope is the front of the box, the thing that you keep up and look at to figure out where the pieces are, and the design are the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle themselves. So whether it's 100 pieces or 1,000 pieces, um, I think Les, you had a great example that expanded upon that just a little bit.
Sure. If you look at that, you may have, let's say, as you said, a jigsaw puzzle may have 1,000 pieces, 100 pieces. Most schools want to think that they can solve their project, design it as a 100 piece puzzle. It might need to be 1,000 piece puzzle realistically, and you're only going to need understand that if you gather that information on the front end, which is what we talked about a few slides back. But likewise, not every project and every solution has to be complex. And so there may be simpler solutions that might be done with less effort or less financial resources, but you might be able to do it in other ways. You may be able to simplify, reduce the number of pieces in that puzzle. So that's important in thinking about scope and execution.
Yeah, that's great. A lot of people will have
Abs-
need 100 piece puzzle and they try to turn it into 1,000 piece puzzle. So it can go either way on that. So, Scott, when you develop your timelines, what human factors do you consider?
The biggest human factor that we are always trying to be fully aware of is the impact it'll have on teaching and learning in our districts. So we want to make it as seamless as possible for them to make the educational experience as great as we can possibly make it. So that can involve getting things done very like early in the summer if you are going to be able to stay completely, kind of stay out of the building,
Mhm.
when you're able to, but like I want to emphasize that whenever you set that, if it's early so you don't make an impact, you want to make sure and leave that time for training and testing and retesting to just make sure everything is going to be implemented the way it needs to be. So, really, a focus on how it impacts teaching and learning is really the biggest factor, I'd say, Jim.
All right, excellent,
Yeah, and
excellent.
if I can add
Yeah.
to that, the five W's and an H, although we're presenting them in a specific order right now, you might find that you know you move on to how, and then how can inform um, the when. So how are we going to get this done? Go out and do it yourself. See how long it takes to get something done. You might find that you do need that 1,000 piece puzzle, not the 100 piece. Now you have to go back and refigure out when are we going to start this based on how we figured out it was going to go by doing it ourselves and seeing the actual results.
All right, so now we're taking it all the five W's, we're going into the H of how. All right. So, Desiree, we'll kind of continue with you. Um, what's so important about how?
How is important because like I mentioned, going out and doing it and figuring out how it's done, it can inform, does this need to be done during overnight hours? Is it a weekend project? So went out and tried it. Turns out that we have to use self-tapping screws and they're really loud. So there's no way that this can be done during school hours. It has to be done after hours. And there's only a 4 hour window of time between when students leave the building and when the building is armed for the night. And, How will the installers have access to the building? Do we need to provide someone to go to the different schools with them and be there with them at all times? And so the how really it is the meat of the project. It's, how are you getting it done? When is it going to be done? And how does that impact just everything else? See, I'm even getting a little bit I'm stumbling on some speed bumps in my head because there's just so much to think about when it comes to how. But what I know
Yeah.
from experience is go out and do something yourself. You think that it's gonna take 2 minutes to install a beacon on a drop tile ceiling. Go out and do it. See how long it takes. You might find out that it takes you 10 minutes. And then you have to start back from square one, have conversations with all those people all over again. Hey, we talked about it was going to happen by the beginning of the school year. Now, not so much. So we need to get communications involved. And going back and referencing that RACI matrix is really, really important in ensuring that you keep that trust culturally with the project. Your organizational change management, people don't feel like they're being left out of the loop. And I'm going to stop now because my brain is just going from the
Well,
how. So it's an
it's
important
such,
topic.
yeah, it's a great example because really all of these fit together and it can seem simple, who, what, when, where, why, and how. It's like, okay, that's basic. We learned all that in school, all that good stuff. We've changed the order a little bit to meet our purposes, but they all fit together. So the how are we going to install something helps indicate the when we're going to have to get started. So sometimes you go back to a previous decision because you discover additional intel, additional information that impacts those deliverables. It all works together. It is your execution strategy and your execution plan. And again, it all fits together. Scott, Les, is there anything you'd like to add to this?
I'll add something. It kind of goes back to a point Desiree was making. But if you look at this, you've really got three options for executing anything. You're either going to outsource it, you're going to do it yourself, she was talking about, or you're going to rely on some form of collaboration to get it done. So that's true not only for the things you may install or build, it's true for the operations as well. And so you can always look at those three things. How are we going to get this done? Can we outsource it? Is that the best way? Can we afford it? Can we just simply do it ourselves? Do we rely on people in the community in different ways to collaborate with us to get this done? So all of these tangibles and intangibles, everything from training and policy down to building and systems, always comes down to
Excellent.
those three ways of doing it.
Okay, so now we've covered the five W's and a H, and we've tried to give as much detail as we could to help show you the importance of these steps. Again, we're not trying to turn everyone into a project management expert. We just want to teach you the lessons we've learned as we've established projects through the years and how we've delivered them successfully to our organization or our customers. So now we have identified a four-phase model for project management and how this would work. So each phase answers a practical question and produces a tangible deliverable. So can you outline a little bit for us, Les, uh, how this looks and how you deliver it?
Sure. Now we all talked about this, and it could be a more complex approach. You could have more phases. We felt like the simplest way to look at this would be minimalist way would be four phases for discussion. And so again, you have a long and complex, potentially complex project. You need to be able to see it in terms of clear phases, and those phases are distinguished with certain deliverables. For example, in the initial visioning phase, I think this may be out of sequence here, but the initial visioning phase, you would need to have a project chart, what I would call a project charter, what we showed as a project charter, where you're identifying the scope, the vision of what we want. What is its relationship to the overall district's goals? How does that align? It does some of the initial selling and all the buy-in foundation to establish the importance of what we're doing. And it also works to protect the organization, protect the school district, in order to demonstrate that you're approaching this in a very reasonable, rational way. You're attempting to be as comprehensive as possible. Perfection is never possible. Something will always be left out. But this charter is that first important first step for doing that.
All right. Scott and Desiree, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, that was perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got nothing. Thanks, Les.
All right.
Thanks.
So I think what's important for us to remember is that the four-phase model is your map. And without a map, how do you know when you've arrived? Okay. And that's the bottom line is. So that's what we're trying to do with the four-phase. So yeah, well done, Les. You teed that up really well. Let's go now into the second phase. That is the assessment. What standards guide your written assessment? And there's many standards out there and there's many resources available for you. What are you guys using and how is that benefiting as you're trying to upsell your goal and for your project?
If I could, like in my case, if I went back to my example, where we said
Mhm.
that initial, charge was how do we make our schools safe and secure without feeling like a prison? We, looked to the past guidelines, did our assessment of the current conditions in the district, and then from there we developed an RFP, a request for proposals, that became our really our project charter, that we worked through. And that's how we knew what we had set out to do in the beginning was accomplished. So we kind of worked through that process, and that's how, that's from my experience, it worked very well.
Excellent. Excellent. Les, is there anything you'd
Sure.
like to add on the assessment?
Yeah, thinking in terms of this same thing with standards and guidelines, you have to look at it from several different, realistically, and actually from a liability standpoint, you've got to look at it from several sides. One would be your state regulations, but those regulations they may have changed, but even if they haven't changed, it could be that recent security incidents with schools changes the way people see the interpretation of those existing standards that are state law. But then you've also got into what would be called industry standards. These are shown here on this slide. PASS provides a set of guidelines. ASIS provides a set of standards and guidelines. So they're all sets of the FBI has a set of standards and guidelines. So you have industry guidelines that are not mandated, but are a good model to follow. You also have community standards. What do the majority of schools in your state do? That would be
Yeah.
considered a community standard. And you also have things called leading practices, sometimes erroneously referred to as best practices. And what do a few really strong leaders in the education field do? All of those could be considered, and it's important to be mindful and to some degree of those that they exist.
All right, so let me ask a quick question here as we're heading towards the end. A lot of people are hesitant to put their assessment in writing. Is there a negative to putting it in writing?
May I jump in?
Yeah, please.
Okay. There's a negative to publishing it, but there's not a negative to have an intentional and defined controlled distribution of this in order to drive decisions. Secondly, this becomes a matter of record, of your own legal record. And so if you have a violent incident years later, what you want to be able to show was not that it's not going to show that you're not perfect. What you want to be able to show is that you identified a problem, you created a plan to get to a solution to that problem, you applied the resources that were available to you today or the next day to start working toward that problem. That shows reasonableness. The goal is reasonableness, not perfection. And
Good.
having all that in writing, your strengths and your weaknesses and where your challenges are, that will not only drive change, but it will protect you.
Excellent. Excellent. So
Can I
don't
add
be
one thing,
afraid to
Jim?
do it. No.
I want to just I agree with everything Les said. I just also, in addition, I would just say basing your assessment on established guidelines, standards, laws, and just showing how your project met those. To me, that's what you want to shoot for. And that's why I believe like the past guidelines or any other, ones that are out there like are important to engage as you start working on these projects.
All
And
right.
I know
So
we're trying to end this, but I have one
yeah.
very succinct thing to say. Risk assessments written in meetings, things that are said, they are all considered to be records of a unit of law enforcement and thereby are not FOIA-able, or there really nobody's allowed to access that information because it relates to the security of the school and the buildings.
Okay. Excellent.
Good point.
Excellent. And again, every district is a bit different and every state has their own laws. So make sure you check with your district for what you're doing, but don't
My
necessarily
bad.
be afraid of a written assessment. It is critical to have a guide, and that's what a written security assessment is. It's a guide. Um, and so, as we're winding down over the last couple of points that we wanted to share, if you have a question, please drop it into the chat. We'd love to be able to answer your questions. And we're really hoping that we've been able to help everyone out. So let's get now to execution. Uh, the priorities, purchasing policy, implementation strategies, and timing. This is the play called by the coach. How do you execute it? Les, what do you think? How do you implement the play called in number two?
Well, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but you have to look at what your options are going to be for execution. What can you outsource? What can others provide and install and guarantee for you? That's always desirable if you have the money and you can get good quality execution through outsourcing. The second option is going to be what can we or should we do ourselves? For example, it may be just as easy to develop your own training program on some aspect of what you're doing with security as it is to try to find an ideal one and you have somebody come from across the country to deliver it. You might have all the capacity you need to develop a perfectly reasonable training program. And then finally, what are those things that we need to collaborate with others to fully execute? Some of it may require parents, can be a real roadblock, going back to an earlier term. And we may need to find a strategic way to get their collaboration to buy in. For example, on changes, I'll give you a real common one, changes on pickup and drop off procedures. You're making physical changes to make those safer. 40% of all school fatalities are vehicular based. It's a serious area. You got to get buy-in from parents. There's always people not wanting to follow the new procedures. So all of those are execution strategies that you need to be mindful of earlier instead of later.
All right, great, great. Now let's go to the final point we wanted to make. Number four, the handoff. The handoff to the school safety operations manual, training, etc. Scott, why is the handoff so important?
It's really important that, across your district, whether it's a small to medium size like mine or a very, very large one like Desiree's, it's extremely important that everyone is working off the same sheet of music. So having that handbook or guidebook or training program ready to go and getting it implemented and get everyone engaged is extremely important in creating a good handoff.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah. I would
Um,
add,
yeah,
if I can add
Desiree.
to that, it's important, not only, from those communication aspects that you just mentioned, Scott, but the physical maintenance of the system. Have you made sure that those who are going to be maintaining the physical components know what to do and when and how to monitor it. So how often is training updated? Do new employees need to take it when they first, start with the school system? And if so, how do you track that? How do you make sure they receive that training? So handing it off, it should be a set it and a forget it in a perfect world, but we don't live in a perfect world. So making sure that, you're maintaining that operational consistency is very important.
Excellent, excellent. Can you give an example of where a handoff failed? You've never had one fail then. I have. And it
I
really
have, but it'd
revolved,
take me a minute.
yeah.
So go
It
go
I
ahead,
it it
Jim.
I
really,
have seen
yeah, go
former
ahead, Les.
failures when I look at failed security measures that were not maintained.
Yeah.
That now we're coming back years later to try to correct. So I've seen old handoffs that didn't work.
That didn't work or didn't continue.
Yes,
The handoff has to
exactly.
continue. It's not a one play handoff. It's live, it's ongoing. Les, can
You
you
know,
summarize? Yeah,
I'm going to chime in there, Jim. Let's just
please.
say we it is extremely busy for schools out there in the field, to do everything that's expected of them, and it's been that way and it still continues to be that way. So this is an area that you've got to like work hard on to make sure that not only the initial, but then the continuing, needs for like a good handoff, like are updated, evaluated, and refreshed to
Yeah.
to keep things, operating on a successful level. And
All
thanks
right.
for letting me chime in.
No, no, thank you, Scott. We have a question here. I want to try and squeeze that in real quickly, but that is, what do you do when you identify the who needs to be involved and you have somebody that does not want to participate? How do you handle that? Anybody?
The way that I've handled that is to sit down and just have an honest people conversation with them as a person, not even from our positions. Hey, listen, I really think you have some valuable input here, and you were identified as somebody that would be crucial to this process and this project. Tell me what concerns you about being involved. Is there a roadblock in your way that I can help to remove? And, just have a real conversation with them about why not?
Yeah.
Great.
I'll add
Great.
this.
Yeah.
If you can be patient, if you absolutely cannot, find out what leverage you have,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that ends up being a thing, and so it's just where in the middle of those things, you may be, might determine like what you do. But like if it's possible, be patient and keep doing the things that Desiree's talking about selling them on the idea and how their participation will make it a better outcome and a safer school.
May I
So
Well,
add a quick thing to what
yeah.
Scott was saying? This goes back and reinforces the value of that vision and that charter that we talked about at the beginning. If written well, it serves as an ongoing persuader for those kinds. That's a roadblock. That person is a roadblock, one of many. And they may just need to understand the scope of what's happening and why that particular change is a necessary part of that. That change is affecting them, and they don't want to be involved for some reason. So
Yeah.
a well-written charter can go a long way in selling people to do what they may not want to do.
Well, it's building culture. And part of the
Yes.
culture you're building in a safety environment is participation. Everyone has to be a part of it. And so it is really important to build that culture. And if that culture doesn't exist, then it's your job as an administrator, as a leader, to help build that culture. And it starts
Yeah.
small, but
Yeah.
everything starts small and grows big. Well, guys, listen, this has been great. I've learned a whole lot working with y'all over the last 6 weeks or so as we've developed this and had all these
Same here.
conversations. We hope that we provided everyone the tools that you would need just to get started. It's not the tools necessary to have go from concept to completion. These are tools to help you get started answering the questions and the roadblocks and the problems and the issues that we've all overcome many, many times. And some of us have learned more by not overcoming than we learned when we did overcome. But the truth is that everything begins with a seed. And that begins with you as a leader. You're planting it, you're nurturing it, you're growing it. And hopefully the 5 W's and an H and these 4 phases help you out. We're going to have a white paper out. We're going to have some links and we're going to share some of this data. The PowerPoint's going to be available. We've just hit the top of the hour. So I want to thank everybody for your participation, for everyone hung out to the end. Desiree, Les, Scott, thanks a lot. Max, thanks for your help. We'll talk to you
Thanks,
guys soon.
everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.